Hello and welcome to Root Causes, the PKI and Security podcast where a pair of industry veterans talk about all matters digital certificates in PKI. I'm Tim Callan, Chief Experience Officer at Sectigo, and I'm here with Jason Soroko, SVP of Product at Sectigo. How are you doing today, Jason?
Doing great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So we want to talk about, we've talked in the past about OCSP. OCSP obviously is real-time revocation checking, so when a browser goes to visit someplace with a certificate, there is a check that is made on in the moment to say is the certificate revoked or not. Seems like a great concept in principle, right? And it supersedes the prior method, which was CRL, Certificate Revocation List, where the CA publishes a list of the certs that have been revoked, and then the browser checks against that list to see if the cert's revoked. And you can see where that feels kludgy and inefficient in a number of ways. But as so often happens with these things, it turns out that in a more sophisticated, nuanced worldview, suddenly we start seeing the trouble with the other solution with OCSP. And in this case, real specifically, there have been a number of concerns from industry watchers, but also from industry people, including like browsers, about the privacy of their user in an OCSP scenario, right?
Right on, Tim. So that's interesting. So what have been that you've been at that table?
Yeah.
So what are they saying in the book?
Well, so the trouble is if I'm doing a real-time lookup for any given site or subdomain that I'm going to, then it's possible for somebody to see the site or the subdomains that I'm going to. And that might not be anybody's business. And we can think of lots of reasons why that wouldn't be anybody's business. And even if they can't see, the contents of my correspondence, just the fact that I'm navigating to certain places could be problematic in lots of ways. And one of the things we've mentioned earlier in this podcast that's worth considering is if you're not protecting privacy universally all the time, and you're just focused on a very specific moments, then that becomes a privacy problem as well, right? And so you have to kind of think of it broadly. And even if I don't care if anybody knows that I go to Amazon, right? Or the very fact that you isolate some things we're gonna be able to look at and other things we're not is also problematic. So you have to think about it universally everywhere. And yeah, if someone could sit and tell the individual behaviors of each individual as they go get OCSP lookups, that is potentially a privacy problem.
Absolutely. We did a podcast recently about privacy cookie tracking.
Yeah.
We've talked about all this. It's just another way to track you.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of client side, kind of server side. So it's in other words, these are things that are not secret. Yeah. And so I can see that, Tim. Good point.
Right. Now, on the other hand, we have revocation for a reason, and we have revocation checking for a reason. So then you go, well, okay, what's the alternative? There are two alternatives. The first one we already mentioned. It's CRL, Certificate Revocation List, right? Now we just said, well, hold on a second. Doesn't that sound like it's inefficient? Yeah, in a way it is, right? And it probably will continue to be. There are techniques you can use to improve the efficiency, like you can split and shard and segment your CRLs in various ways, for instance, so that you don't have to give the entire CRL to everybody all the time, right? And that definitely makes the whole system more efficient. And it means that the CA's CRL handling has to be more sophisticated, right? And they need their own schema, and they need their own automation around that. And you need to have software systems in place to do that, and they need to work correctly. But it absolutely is an option. And the other option, of course, and this would be a radical change for the industry on the whole, but could be, it's within the realm of what could be done from a computer science perspective, is just extraordinarily short certificate lifespans. So let me just pick an arbitrary thing. Let's suppose, hypothetically, that every public SSL certificate was good for 1 day and it was replaced every day. Under those circumstances, if there was a problem with the certificate, that problem would be guaranteed to be gone in not more than 24 hours.
Perfect.
Right? And from a revocation perspective, in reality, that's kind of how long these things take anyway. Like the guidelines, the CAB Forum baseline requirements state that even though in the most extreme revocation scenario, like a private key compromise, for instance, or a DNS mismatch or a domain name mismatch, that the CA has 24 hours to get that revoked. So if the certificate just plain expired in that period of time, then from a practical enforcement perspective, it would be identical to having a revocation mechanism in place if you simply didn't renew the cert. And so there's obviously a lot of work that goes into moving off OCSP to one of these other schemes. And it obviously involves changing a lot of how businesses operate, how CAs operate, et cetera. And in the case of the short-lived cert scenario, and it wouldn't have to be 1 day. It could be 5 days, it could be a week, like we could pick a time frame, right? But if we were, if we wanted to move to one of those scenarios, they are doable. They also are not trivial. And so it's something, and it would involve standards and systems and processes and behaviors on the side of the subscriber, and all of that stuff would have to be in place.
So what we're talking about, Tim, is to the consumer, to the people who actually use their web browsers, right. You probably won't see this transition. It won't affect your life.
It's all in the background. If the cert's revoked, you're going to be presented with a roadblock and an interface that you understand by the browser. And by the way, that's what happens today.
Exactly. You're probably not aware of it at all, and that's the way it should be. I think it's interesting, though. Of course, it will be the browsers who will implement a change. Mm-hmm. It's the browser that is doing this.
Yes.
It's not done at the web server level. It's done at the browser level.
Yeah.
So the other point, though, too, I think there's a couple important points that you've made, Tim, is from a privacy standpoint, revocation has all kinds of problematic issues.
Yeah.
And so therefore, eliminating it completely is, in fact, probably a good goal anyway. The amount of resources it takes to do revocation checking, if people who browse the web understood the sheer amount of complexity and scale it takes to do these OCSP checks, as an example, it's remarkable the amount of work that has to be done. That could be a podcast in itself. I think, though, that there's every benefit to having shorter lifespans. And any time that the CAB Forum and others have talked about it, some of the big industry players have called for it and have instituted it, I think we supported it, Tim.
Yeah.
Right? However, that is not compatible with those of you who are still not employing certificate lifecycle management.
Right. So automation, sorry for the interrupt there, but yeah, I mean, as we start to look at these scenarios, especially, I mean, the arguments in favor of automation and certificate lifecycle management, even with year-long certs, are compelling. When you start to imagine that you're swapping them out every week, it has to be automated. Like at that point, I can't even imagine the organization anywhere in the world, no matter how large or small, who is going to be able to realistically sign up for manual management of these certificates. Like it's just not going to be practical. And so you do, and that's the biggest piece here. Like we still see so much manual management of certificates, even in this late date in history. And before we can get to something like we're going to remove revocation checking because certs are so short-lived that we just don't care, it is going to have to be fully automated universally.
Tim, this is more of a topic of OCSP changes, but I think there's a lot here that is benefiting even from the same effect of going to shorter lifespans as a possible option to do away with that complexity anyway. Yeah. And even just something as simple as misissuance, right, by a CA. It could be from anybody for goodness knows what reason. Going with the shorter lifespans
sure.
of certificates is a good idea.
Yeah, so if there's what we call a 5-day revocation event. So let's suppose that a public SSL cert is issued and the name of the organization is misspelled. Okay? That is an incorrect organization name. If that comes to the attention of the CA, that triggers a 5-day revocation event, which means that the CA has 5 days to do the revoke, right? And if the certificate is 5 days in term, then what you do is you don't revoke it at all. The one you issue next time has the correct details. And the problem solves itself within the time frame that is considered to be acceptable by the rules and by the CAB forum and by the community at large. And it's just a cleaner solution to the problem. And it's 100% reliable, right? There's no scenario where it doesn't work at all. And so if we got to the point where we're cycling all of our certs out every 5 days, then most revocation events would go away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much benefit to the shorter lifespans, but it has to go hand in hand with automation, certificate lifecycle management.
Yeah.
It just goes together. But there it is.
There it is. Short and sweet. Less than 5 days.
That's gonna be something for
there
that.
You go. Yes. All right. So very good. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Tim.
This has been Root Causes.